Hans, how are you?
Hello, Joe. I'm fine, thanks.
Go.
Okay. Let's just send a mail to you and Pam, just to be correct, but I'm fine that you're there. Thank you.
No, you got it. Absolutely. Are you recording this or what are we doing?
I am recording this. If it's okay, maybe I will block some posts of the interview on the Custo website and on my blog, maybe.
Okay. I've been having a few issues with Skype here or there, so hopefully it's going to come across okay.
Okay. Okay, let's start. I don't know. Have you seen my questions?
I do.
Or
Yes, I've seen the questions.
okay,
I ran through them. I think they're good to go.
okay,
You can go anytime you want to.
okay. Thank you. So let's start with question one. So everybody is telling or trying to tell his story, and the best advice to make a different story. What's your best advice to make a different story?
Well, I think the issue right now is that everyone is doing some form of content marketing and they're getting into it. They're trying to figure out what that means to them. And the thing that I think we're seeing more than anything else is that a lot of what I would call Me Too content. So it's a lot of content that's just like everyone else is in the industry. It's not a different story. It's maybe a similar story. They're trying to make a little bit better. And I think the biggest challenge that enterprises or even mid-market companies are having is that they're trying to target too many people at one time. And to really be effective at content marketing, we've got to go as niche as we possibly can and focus on the smallest portions of audience. That's why it's different than advertising. Advertising is frankly a lot easier because we're trying to target as many people as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
But with content marketing, in some cases, we're trying to target the few. And that's where if we try to go bigger with our messaging, it's going to get irrelevant. It's not specific enough. It's not helpful enough. And so if I was to advise people on what they need to do is really look at who your personas are, really get your audience down to what, let's say that you have the average company, what probably has between 6 and 9 personas. Well, it doesn't mean you have a content marketing strategy for each one of those. Figure out what, maybe you have one for one or two of those, and you have a different content effort just focusing on those. And that's why it gets so difficult because you can't get everybody with the same message. So that would be my advice is really go as for the smallest possible audience you can so that you are the leading informational source for that group of audience.
And that's something that you are doing with your content marketing institute. You're targeting different audiences.
Well, so for us, we have 6 personas right now for
Okay.
CMI, but we only have content marketing strategies for 2 of those
Okay.
audiences. So really the doers and then the executives.
Okay.
And then, but it's changing, right? So now what we're trying to do with our data is to get as much information as we can about what industry they're in, what size company, so that we can then build out more specific content marketing programs to those people. And that's where it gets difficult. And this is why it's not easy to do.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely, that's what we're doing, and that's why it's constantly changing.
Okay, and then you need epic content. I've read your book. It's not about
Thank you.
content who could generate everybody, but really the epic content. Why is it so difficult for companies to create that content?
For the most part, companies aren't built to be publishers. I mean, if you look at the way that most companies are set up, whether that you've got PR silos, corporate communication silos, now you've got social media silos, email marketing silos, they're all built based on the way that we've traditionally marketed. And our customers don't care anything about that. So what you're seeing is almost an evolution of the marketing department looking and feeling more like a publishing entity. We're not set up that way. So if you see some of the best in class, if you look at like Kraft Foods here in the States, or you look
Mm-hmm.
at what Coca-Cola is trying to do and some of the other things, they've created this line called this, we call it a content center of excellence that sort of overlays all the different silos, because we're not going to get out of that. You can't go into a company and say, oh, you can't be siloed anymore. That's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. We're
Okay.
a ways away from some kind of a new marketing internal marketing model. So I think we've got to figure out, somebody needs to own this in the organization first and foremost. The challenge is right now is you usually have somebody that owns it in each one of those silos. In a lot of cases, those content leaders in those silos aren't talking to each other. Big problem. In a lot of cases, we found they haven't even met each other before.
Okay.
Which is a little bit scary. So, like, if there's a to-do or an action item out of it, I think what you got to do is, well, who owns this? Who owns the story process, the content creation and distribution process for the organization? And then how do you bring in those content leaders and set up a team to do that really well so everybody can get on the same page? And then the other thing is do an audit and figure out what content we have to work with before we start creating more content on the back end.
Okay. Yeah, you're talking about that chief content officer. There are many organizations in Belgium who are creating this role today, but the chief content officers, they have difficulties to prove that their strategy is working, that they can convincing, that they can winning customers, that they are leveraging to the growing profit. What are the key figures to convince a CEO of a content strategy?
So if we're looking at objectives beyond what I would call user metrics, where would be things like social sharing or page views or unique visitors. I mean, those are all fine, but it's got to tell a bigger story, right? We've got to somehow make the case that we are, 1, driving sales, 2, saving costs in some way, or 3, creating happier customers, which are leading to maybe more cross-selling or customers staying longer or whatever the case is. So the thing that we, and I think you have in one of your questions, but the idea of the pilot program, I think, works really well for this. So if you're going to run this through, you set up, let's say, a 6-month pilot program and say, this is what we are trying to do. We're trying to create more sales opportunities, or we're trying to get customers to go from this in the purchase funnel to this, or whatever the case is, and then set up your metrics around that. But get the executives in a room and say, this is what we're trying to do, and this is how we're going to do it. In a lot of cases, and this is the struggle with content marketing, the majority of marketers out there don't have any kind of defined content marketing strategy. They just don't. They're just running, we need to do a blog, or we need to create content for Facebook, or we need to do an e-newsletter. And they're not thinking about, ultimately, at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? Like, is it a subscription generation program? And does getting a subscriber, what does that do for the business? I don't think that a lot of, we know for a fact that, in general, at least from the research, no more than 40% of companies out there have some kind of a defined strategy, and I think it's less than that.
And that strategy has to start with a test or with a visual content audit you are doing in companies.
I think that a test is a great way to do it with an organization that's not used to it. Let's say you're looking at a traditional manufacturing organization who's gone to market in a very traditional way. You really need to start out with a pilot, and you want to start with something small, because you're not going to go and hit a home run and say, this is going to take us. I mean, if you look at it from a publisher standpoint, it takes sometimes 18 months plus to create a really loyal audience around something. Well, if you go to a chief marketing officer and you say, this is going to take us 18 months, they'll say, you're fired, we're going to get somebody else. So it takes time to get there. That's why the pilot program really works well, because you basically just need their initial buy-in and say, here's the indicators we're really looking at. Here's the hypothesis. Because you can't you can't show ROI right off the bat. So, we're definitely going to get ROI. Somebody will say, I want return on investment on my content marketing. What does that mean? Does that mean do you know how to work? We do the best we can, but it's built off a hypothesis. Did I lose you? Are you still there?
Yes, you've lost each other for a few seconds, but I think it was fun.
So anyways, so the core would start out with a pilot. I'd say 6 months is a good one. Get everybody in the same room. Make sure we all understand the type of metrics we're looking at, and then create a consistent publishing schedule around that. The first thing is, who is the audience? Who are we really targeting? What are their informational needs? And then go back and do a content audit. What do we have to work with?
Okay. And
internally.
what's the best reaction you ever heard from a marketing executive or from a CEO on a bad audit you've done?
A couple things.
Okay.
First, I think the first thing is in a lot of cases they don't realize they have a lot of content, because most businesses we go to say, "Oh, we don't have the kind of content. We got to create it new." Well, we probably have a lot of the raw materials already. So first we have a good starting point. If you don't do an audit, we don't even know where we're starting from. And what's scary is a lot of people will start creating new content, not realizing that they have a lot of the content assets already set to go. The second thing is when they look at their content, we start doing a visual audit and they really start to look at the content that they've created. They don't realize that a lot of the content created is what I would call bait and switch content, which is really just sales material in disguise. And it makes sense, right? Because if you come from a sales mentality, you want to be pitching and all that content. Well, that's not going to work for your content marketing. We really need to focus on how we can build this relationship long term. Like if you're a magazine, if you're a media property, you don't at the end of every piece of content say, "Oh, and would you sign up for an event?" Or would you buy advertising? They don't do that because they understand that it's all about building this loyal audience first. So I think in a lot of cases, when you do that audit, you sort of realize that, wow, this really isn't truly relevant, truly helpful, truly entertaining content that's going to get people to rely on us as an information provider. So that's why I love doing a visual audit, because they start realizing and they go through all their content and they say, well, this really isn't very good. So we've got to figure out, and that's when they start saying, okay, we need the right people to come in here. We need the right writers, the right content creators. We need some good, solid editors. Realize we don't necessarily have the skills to create content on a consistent basis. The last thing I would say is all about consistency.
Okay.
Most of the content that's created in enterprises is campaign based, over a specific period of time around a specific product or service. Well, content marketing needs to evolve outside of the campaign, because honestly, if we're creating a content initiative, we might iterate that, we might change it, but it honestly never stops. It's a marathon and not a sprint. We've got to make sure that how do we go, even though we know we're selling different products or services in these particular campaigns, content marketing needs to evolve outside of that. It can be educated by it, but it needs to go further than that, and that's where it takes consistency of publishing and a lot of patience.
Okay, yeah, it's in the execution. Let's take 3 quotes of your book, Epic Content Marketing. One quote is, when content marketing fails, it's usually not because of a lack of high quality content, but it's because of a drop in execution. What are the biggest mistakes in execution? Maybe you named already a few?
Well, I always use the IBM statistic, which I think is really interesting. And this is from a couple years ago. And they say
I'm sorry, it's the IBM statistics?
Oh, IBM example. This is from, I think, 2010, where they did an analysis of corporate blogs. And they said it was something like 85% of corporate blogs have 5 or less posts. So think about that. If you're a media company, would you ever do that? Would you ever create a media channel and then just basically not execute against it, and then you wonder why it's not working? So what we want to do is we want to make sure our content is anticipated. Are we publishing on a consistent schedule? Is our Andrew Davis, author of Brandscaping, wrote a really good book on brandscaping. Basically says, are we creating TV? Are we creating content that our audience is anticipating it? The only way that you can create that is through consistency.
Okay.
I see so many e-newsletters that are sent out whenever we can get to it. I see so many blog posts that are on whenever we can get to it. And we've got to make sure it's a priority, because if it's not so supported and so important as part of your marketing, your customers aren't going to see it as important either. So I think number one is absolutely right. It takes a while to build a relationship. You've got to create consistent content, and whatever you have the resources to do. Is that weekly? Is it twice a day? Is it monthly? And what's the channel? It doesn't have to be online. It could be print format. It could be an event. And that's another thing that we're really trying to talk to our customers about is this is not all digital. there's three legs to the stool. There's print, there's online, and there's events. So if you look at a publishing model, that is a well-diversified publishing model, and there might be an opportunity in both print and events as well.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about print in 5 minutes. I've got another quote for you. If you're looking for someone to write blog posts for you, a copywriter is probably not your best bet. Why do you advise a journalist?
Well, first of all, I do know some copywriters that can write really, really well. But the most that I've had an encounter with they're very good at writing copy, sales copy, but not necessarily in really engaging, really helpful, ongoing, consistent posts like a journalist would, like an editor would. By the way, it doesn't have to be a journalist, but they have to have a nose for the story.
Okay.
And I think that's a better way to look at it. So you have to look at your skill base and see. Of course, I love journalists because they understand, okay, what's the real story here? Who's the audience I'm targeting? What are their informational needs? What are their pain points? What keeps them up at night? And how can we solve those on a consistent basis? Journalists do that. That's what they do for a living. And I think that if you are a brand and you're just focusing on, let's say you're using an agency that just has copywriters, the copy might not, maybe they script it really well around your products and services, but not necessarily about the needs of the audience. Okay. And that's all we really care about is the needs of the audience.
Okay. And the third and last quote, the marketing of your content is perhaps the most important part of the content marketing process. What are the biggest mistakes in marketing this content?
So a lot of brands, content marketers feel that if they create a really good piece of quality content, that's all they need. Like for some reason that people are going to find it. And I don't know why we got that feeling, because we've got social media that we think is free, and we've got email newsletters that we can send that are in essence, they're free. So we feel that, we've got the distribution mechanisms. I'll tell you a quick story. We didn't work with this client, but this was about 9 months ago, and they spent about $30,000 US on doing an ebook. The people that downloaded that, they had 2 people that were not current. It was a lead generation activity, so a prospecting activity, trying to get new people into the funnel. Okay. And they had only 2 people that were their target actually download this $30,000 ebook, because they put it on their blog, they sent out a press release, and they were hoping that people would find it, and nobody did. And we call that, they're creating cathedrals in the desert. You create really good pieces of content, nobody can find it. So I think as part of your content creation and distribution program, if you don't have a audience base built in, and this is, I would say, majority of brands don't have an opt-in audience that are anticipating their content, you're going to have to put some paid content, paid promotion against it, whether that's content distribution, whether you're using services like Taboola or Outbrain or Enrelate, okay, or whether you're buying lists or whatever. You have to have that as part of the plan. And what I think is a lot of brands forget that, because you could have the best content in the world, but if nobody knows about it, then you fail.
Okay, you talked already about the print copy. Print has a role in the total package of content marketing. Today in Belgium, printed corporate magazines are very good evaluated by their readers. And also you have got a few reasons why that printed corporate magazine has a role to play. What surprises you the most in this thing that print has a role to play?
I think that actually we're seeing a renaissance in print right now.
Okay. Because
so many brands have gone to digital. We see everybody's going digital, and of course, I mean, a digital first mentality might make sense, and probably does make sense today. The challenge is, or the opportunity, let's say, is the fact that so many brands and traditional publishers have gone online, and they've said, okay, well, we're not in a print, there's not a role for print. To be honest, print's expensive. Print can be expensive, so we've got to make sure we make the most of that. But this is the way that I look at it. If you were going to a trade show and you all your customers were going to be at that trade show, and you were the only competitor that's going to be there, wouldn't you think that would be an opportunity? Say, yeah, that would be a great opportunity. That's, I think, where we're at with print right now. Okay. Because all of our competitors are going online, and they're trying to target us in social channels, and they're trying to go with email, and nothing wrong with that. But the fact is that everyone still has a postal address that we're trying to target for the most part. And a lot of people actually still, as you know, I mean, you've seen the data, they still engage in print. So if they're still using a channel and there's less competition in that channel, that's something that I want to pay attention to. Okay. I think that's where we're at with print now.
Okay. And what's the best way to link that printed magazine to other content media? Do we have to link it?
I think that if you... Yeah. I don't think you have to link it. I think you can. What I like to see is if you have let's say a corporate magazine strategy, say it's a quarterly magazine that you're sending, could you possibly repurpose, reuse, reimagine that content onto your blog, into ebooks, into books? Absolutely. And what we do at Content Marketing Institute is we feed out a different version of our print articles onto our blog, and they do really, really well. But it's not the exact same article. It's sort of reinterpreted, or it's made more online friendly, and it's not the same thing. That print experience is very different. I think if you have to look at it like that, you're not going to say, oh, there's the article we're doing in print. We're going to take that exactly and we're going to throw it online. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. But if you're creating an asset and you think about it ahead of time and say, okay, here's our magazine schedule. How are we going to use this content in our events? How are we going to use it in our blog? How do we use it in social? And you're thinking about that and planning on that ahead of time, you can leverage that throughout all of your content. Let alone, let's say that you don't do that, though. You could just say standalone. Let's say that magazine is the retention initiative, and we know, I mean, I've been working in the association industry for a long time. If you ask association members what is the number one or number two reason they are members, they almost always say the magazine. Okay. Getting that magazine is of critical importance. The same holds true for a brand. So it can stand alone on itself as part of a way to build relationships with customers and build an audience, and a better way to leverage that would be, how do I take that into other channels? But the difference is, don't plan for it after the fact, which is what most brands do. Oh, we got all this magazine content. How do we use it in 100 different ways? What I want to do is I want to plan up front as part of our content editorial calendar and say, okay, here's our articles, and then how are we going to communicate that story in these different channels? What are our goals in these different channels, and how are they going to talk with each other? I think that's the way to do it.
Okay. Content marketing has also a positive effect on employee affinity. How do you explain this?
Well, first of all, employees are our best marketers, right? Okay. Today, what's great is that all of us have an audience. Everybody does, whether they talk to people, whether they have their own followers on social media, whatever the case is. If we can get our employees to talk more favorably about the business, that's going to help the business. And in a lot of cases, they might not even know what's going on in the company on a regular basis. So whether you do that on a daily update, an internal blog post, intranet cases, in a lot of cases, we're not leveraging or harnessing that opportunity just for letting them know what's going on. The second thing is, in a lot of cases, those employees, that's where our content resides. Okay. They have the expertise. They're talking to the customers. So all our things like our FAQs are really, like if you work for, let's say you target engineers and you have engineers working in your organization. Those engineers are a treasure trove of information. They might not want to directly blog for you or create content for you, but your editors and your chief content officers, whatever you want to call them, can interview those people, get that raw content, and create a content production schedule based on the internal knowledge that you have. Most organizations, I would say, don't use that. They're not leveraging their current employees enough from how can we leverage them to help tell a better story, because that's where a lot of that wisdom and knowledge resides, so that we can better communicate to our customers.
Okay, maybe the last question. I interviewed you in 2010, if I'm correct.
That was a while ago.
That's
Yeah.
a while ago, yeah, but I
Yeah.
think, is there a lot of change? What's for you the biggest change in that period?
It's a boy. It's been an amazing. So it's been 4 years, and there's not almost every marketer we talk to has an understanding of at least a basic understanding of what content marketing is. In 2010, that wasn't the case at all.
Okay.
And what I love about actually, I just blogged about it. Actually, I just put an e-newsletter together about this exactly for CMI. Is getting everyone on the same page with what content marketing is huge for the industry. Because when I started working in this industry 15 years ago, we were calling it custom publishing, custom media.
Yeah.
Customer media was huge. Corporate publishing's huge in Germany. I mean, we're calling it something different. And when we call it something different, we can't advance the industry. So now that we're all sort of talking about the same thing, I think it's better. We understand more about who's doing it well. We can share case studies with each other so the industry can mature and we can start learning from each other. That's the biggest issue.
Okay.
And the other thing is, I've never seen as much money coming into the industry as it is right now. We're seeing two things happen. We're seeing traditional marketing budgets are being siphoned off and that are going to content efforts. That's happening in every company we talk to. They're doing that right now. The second thing is we're seeing a ton of angel investing, a ton of venture capital funding, fund technology providers in the industry, media properties around this, agencies in this. So it's almost like social media was back in 2006, 2007, where we had a ton of money come in and you saw a ton of innovation. I think that's what you're seeing now. You're seeing a lot of innovation in technology and you're seeing a lot of innovation in content because there's so many more resources.
Okay, thank you very much for your 30 minutes and see you in 4 years.
All right, sounds
Success
good.
and thank you for your content, Joe.
You got it. Thanks again. Keep
Thanks.
doing your thing.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.